thanks for meeting with me. You had come up to me a few weeks ago, and you said that you had a story to tell, and it's a tragic story, but it's also a story of redemption and grace. And so, thank you for having the courage to share your story, and I believe that it's going to help uh, hundreds and hundreds of young women that are struggling today. And so, thanks. Welcome. Tell me a little bit, like what what brought you here, and where you at today?
Okay, so when I was 8 years old, um, I was molested by my grandfather, and there was like seven grandchildren, and I was the only one that he ever approached and touched, and it's really hard for me because it wasn't like a one-time thing. It would go on for like months, and I wouldn't say anything because it was like so quick that I forgot about it because I was young. But it got to the point where I was like scared to spend the night and scared to see him and interact with him because I didn't want to be touched anymore. But then um, one day it was just like I woke up to him touching me and it terrified me and I was like paralyzed in the bed and scared to move and I didn't understand it and I ran out to my grandma and I told her and she just looked at me and told me that, you know, he probably just thought that you were me. So don't worry about it.
Oh my gosh.
But um, she told my parents, and then we weren't allowed to spend the night anymore. And I mean, I was the only one who knew, and my sisters didn't know why they couldn't spend the night. And like listening to them complain about not being able to see my grandma or my grandpa, like it just put like more guilt on me. You know, I blame myself for what happened because of how my sisters felt and how I felt, and then how my grandma reacted to it because when we stopped coming over, she started paying like more attention to my cousins and my other side of the family.
Mm,
And I almost felt like neglected
right.
because of it. Like she blamed me also, and so that put even more guilt on me. And it made me like really bitter inside. And you know, the whole concept of family was just really screwed up for me after that. Like I didn't I couldn't feel like the love when people touched me. Like it made me uncomfortable and I thought that they like hurt me like how my grandpa did. It was hard on my mom because she didn't understand like why I wasn't like acceptable of it and my sisters didn't understand. They always told me you don't love me and it's like I did. I just didn't know how to show it. I didn't know how to like accept it. And it was like middle school, like 8th grade when I started like turning to guys to look for the love from like my family because I thought, okay, if I can't feel it from, you know, family, then okay, maybe like guys can give it to me. And it didn't work out that way. Like I just felt like I was used all the time.
So you found that your family, you just uh, found like you were alienating yourself from your family. You didn't want to associate with them because of that fear of feeling the way you did with your
Yeah.
grandpa. And so you reached out in junior high to boys. And so tell me about that a little bit. Like, so you would just pour your heart out to boys and give yourself to boys in a way that, so that you would be loved?
Yeah. I looked for my self confidence in them.
Mm,
And if a guy didn't find me pretty, then I didn't think I was pretty. Or if a guy found one of my friends pretty, then I looked at her and compared myself to her. And I just had like this low self confidence for such a long time. And, you know, it was guys weren't wanting to like date me and have relationships with me. It was just like a short thing, like a little flirt here and there, and then you know nothing at all. And it's just I told myself it's because you know you're ugly. You know I even blamed it on like that they somehow knew what happened between me and my grandpa, and I blamed it on me again. Like I was like I don't know like a freak or something. And
mm.
and it was hard. Like I just wanted to feel love from somebody, and I couldn't, and I didn't know how to like talk to my parents about it, and I would talk to my friends about it, but it's like not a way, like they don't know like everything, like they couldn't give me answers and stuff. And
So you couldn't find any answers from your family, or and your friends weren't a good source, and even boys became a source that added on more guilt and more shame. So people weren't the answer. What did you turn to?
I turned to self-harm, and I used to cut myself to cope with like the depression or the stress or the just feeling ugly. Like when it first started out, I was like scared to do it. I was scared to, make myself bleed, but I still wanted to hurt outside rather than hurt inside. And so I used to like take a lead pencil and carve words like "you're ugly" into my arm and stuff. And my friends found out, and they told the principal. And so, I mean, I got sent home early because they thought that I was like suicidal. They didn't want to be liable if I did commit something because they didn't do anything to stop it. And then my mom found out, and it freaked her out. And like I felt bad for it, but I still needed something, and so I decided to do it in secret. And it got worse to the point where I was actually, like making scars and drawing blood, and it's like it was never enough. Like I had to always have new scars or be doing it more to cope with the pain because the pain was always there. Like it was never leaving.
What brought you to the point where you reached out and found help?
It'd been like 4 years the first time, and I was like tired of hurting myself. Like it was like I was coming to the realization that I didn't need to do it, but I didn't know how to stop. And so I asked my mom if I could go to therapy and get some help that way just to talk things out because I knew that I had a lot of unnecessary guilt because whenever we would like talk about the stuff that like triggered my emotions during like TNL or during church, like it always like I could feel it in my heart that like something was wrong, like the way I was thinking was wrong, and I'd start crying, and I knew that I needed to stop, but I didn't know how. And so I started going to therapy, and me and my therapist like talked about my grandpa and then like everything else that had gone on, and I got all that cleared. And so like the guilt from like my grandpa and stuff is gone, but like the bitterness from like my grandma and stuff is still there because I still feel neglected by all of them. And so when I came out of therapy like 5 months later, like I was happy, like I felt it. I felt like change, and I was like, that's what made me want to cut my hair. I wanted like to be like a new person, and then something big happened, and it just triggered everything. And that's when like the cutting got really bad, and it was like I was doing it, you know, every 4 days, every 2 weeks. Like I couldn't stop. There was nothing about it, and it wasn't even to the point where something had to be wrong. I just felt like I had to cut.
And it led you down just spiral, worse than ever before cutting. Um, when did it stop, and how?
In May, I was talking to a friend about it, and he like he'd been trying to help me, but it's like it always happens. Like I always talk about it all the time, and I felt like people would get fed up with it. Either I was disappointing them or making them, unhappy with, me cutting myself. And it just came down to the fact that he told me that I was weak and pathetic and that I was never going to change. And that's what made him like sad, He told me like I was scared. I'm scared for you for when you go away because you're never going to change and you're just always going to do this. And it made me angry to the point where I wanted to stop to like prove him wrong. And then along the way, like I did it for me. Like I'd been like 2 weeks, and I was like, I don't need to do this anymore. Like there's no point in it. It just, I don't know. It like just something just clicked. And
Yeah. Um, we had met before, and we've talked about how it was difficult for you to embrace the love of God and the grace that Jesus gives us. And can you talk a little bit how it was you just didn't feel like worthy of God's grace?
Well, yeah, because I blame myself for my grandpa touching me, and then I mean that led me to do like other stuff, and then I just felt like I was just the worst person out there. Like, I mean, I had met people who had done, things worse than me, but they weren't feeling guilty for it, and it just made me feel more guilty. And I just, I felt like, why would God put me through this? Like, why would He let my grandpa touch me when I was 8 and like take that like innocence away from me? And why would He let my grandma just be like neglectful and let my family like because my family they didn't believe that it had happened. They thought that I just made the whole thing up. And so like this whole time I'm like struggling with this, and they just think it's like a figment of my imagination. And like that's when I was just like, okay, then I'm just this horrible person who just doesn't deserve any type of love.
Yeah, we talked about that to the extent, and it was really cool to watch you um, begin to embrace the grace of God, and that sometimes we give, even from the testimony of your grandpa, who took power, who was really big in your life. He took things from you, and then people became really big in your life, and they begin to identify you and take from you, and all these people begin to take from you, and then when you believe that you weren't worthy enough to receive God's grace and God's mercy, and so I remember you talking about that, and really trying to grasp the fact that Jesus does love you. And so when did that take hold in your own heart? When we baptized you, and that's when kind of around the same time that you asked to be baptized, and that we were really discussing what it meant to be loved by God, and to embrace that Jesus covers all of your sin, and that He takes your guilt and takes your shame, and that He gets to identify you now as a Christian, and nobody else gets to identify you. Your grandfather doesn't identify you. Your abuse doesn't identify you. And these boys don't identify you. Your friends don't get to identify you, but Christ does. And so, tell me about that time when you were just really working through that, and that really embracing the grace of God.
It was probably like around the whole like baptismal thing. Like around that time, like I don't know, after that I just felt like so at peace with everything. Like it just it was easier to fit in with people because I struggled with it for a long time. And then like after that, I felt like new again.
It's awesome. So tell me about some of the friends, because we've heard a lot about the negative, and about all the people that have taken from you. What about all the God's people that have really loved you and embraced even your hurt and your pain, and just loved you even through that? Because you've had a huge amount of people that have done that here. And so talk about that for a little bit.
Well, I mean, you and Mama Sheila obviously have been like a really big impact on my life. But there's people like Hannah Gassaway, who's like through all this, she was like always there, and she's like the person I would turn to the most when it happened. Like the minute I did it, I would tell her first, and she wouldn't like get mad at me. She would tell me like, "Hun, like you don't have to do that to yourself. Why are you hurting yourself? Like, like you're so much more than what's going on." And she was the one who was like pushing me to get help again, because she told me that, like you're being chased by these demons, and you don't need it anymore.
That's awesome.
And it's like I consider her family. Like when I introduce her, I call her my cousin, and I'm happy to say that because she's been more like loving to me than my own family has. And then Sam Gasly also, like she comes up to me and tells me, like, you were the strongest person that I've ever met. And it's like, I don't see it, but she sees it, and it gives me, like, hope that maybe I can get to see myself as the same person that she sees me. And then there's Emily, who's, like, my best friend, and she's always been there, like, too. Like, we kind of have, like, the same struggles. Like, she never cut herself, but I mean, the whole having anxiety and stuff was there for her also, and we would help each other out. And I don't know, it's just when I'm around those people, that's when I'm really happy and I can feel loved and, feel wanted. And
Yeah, it's kind of a totally opposite of what the other people were, from your grandpa to people in your school to the boys. All those people wanted to take from you, and you see God's people wanted to give to you, and that's really cool. So if there's a girl out there struggling right now, what would you want to tell her?
I tell her to, get help, or find people who make you happy and talk to them about it, and, like, turn to God, because I didn't turn to God. Well, I did, but I turned to Him, late. And if I turned to Him before, then I probably would have saved myself a lot of scars and a lot of pain, a lot of hurt. But the stuff that gets you through it is having the right people there to hold your hand and help you through your struggles. And if you find those people, then hold on to them, because they'll help you.
Thanks, Calyn. Thank you for having the courage to talk, and I love you, and I'm grateful to God that He has clothed you with His righteousness, and that you are no longer a girl that needs to be identified by her scars, but you can be identified as a child of God, covered in His blood. And so that is forever, and that we could now seek and walk and find healing in Christ as we go on our days. Life is not short of scars, but God is in the business of covering those and changing lives, and you are a testimony of that.